All right, thank you for joining us today for the GBTA Mid-Year Virtual Summit and Annual Business Meeting. This session is Reclaiming the Travel Budget, How to Work with the C-Suite on Budget. Thanks for joining us. A couple of housekeeping items. Registrants, microphones, and videos will not be enabled during this session. Please make sure to put your questions in the Q&A box. These will be answered if time permits or potentially after the webinar via email. Please remember to keep your event hub handy. This is your gateway to all the different sessions today. We'd like to thank our sponsor, and we're going to have a word from our sponsor, CWT.
At CWT, our purpose is simple. It's to connect people and help business succeed. And for generations, company and government employees around the world have relied on us for efficient, safe and secure travel experiences using our innovative services and technologies. The easing of certain travel limitations in various geographies, coupled with the successful implementation of CWT's Travel Essentials proposition, which you can find on our website, mycwt.com, assures a safe resumption of business travel for all. And at the same time, we're excited to be further ramping up our operational capacity, reopening offices to best support our customers and their business travel needs.
All right, and I'd like to introduce our speakers for this amazing panel. I'd like to welcome Keesup, Choe, CEO Predictex. I'd also like to introduce Alicia King, Global Category Manager at Commercial Air and Ground Transportation for Chevron. And I'd also like to introduce Tina Quattlebaum, the Director of Global Operations at Pfizer. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, so it's Keesup. It's my pleasure to spend some time with my friends Tina and Alicia. And I want to thank you both because you're two of the smartest people that I know in the sector. And you don't often speak at these things. So, and especially you, Alicia, I know that you're on vacation. So thank you so much for making some time to share your experiences with us. So just setting the stage a little bit. So obviously the Delta variant notwithstanding, knock on wood, corporate travels, it hopefully resumes in some capacity. And certainly if you look at the leisure travel, the volume is pretty much all back up. But it would be understatement to say that last year has been challenging to the sector. And some travel managers have faced, I would say, existential threats as their organizations have cut down travel and planning dramatic cuts going forward. But others have seen an increase in influence and visibility as they've engaged with stakeholders. And so how have you found your role and your team's role changing as a result of the pandemic? Maybe start with you, Tina.
Sure. So, our team has always been part of the global task force that engages whenever any type of event occurs. I mean, I think typically, there's the initial reaction and response to the event. And of course, with the pandemic, it's been an ongoing visibility and an ongoing engagement with the global task force. So we have, I think one key thing is we just are very engaged with the key stakeholders, and that
is Tina frozen?
I think so.
Uh-oh. Yeah, Tina, hopefully you'll come back. That's a fantastic cue for you, Alicia.
Going on, and then the
sorry.
Sorry.
Tina, you dropped out for a little bit. It's a curse of Zoom, isn't it? One thing I know that's happened, and maybe you can, I'm sure you discussed it, and maybe you can reprise it for the audiences. I think meetings and events got integrated under your purview. How's that going?
Yeah, so it's going very well. I mean, certainly we are in the early stages of the integration of the two teams. So we're evaluating the entire end-to-end process and how things work, what works, what doesn't work, what could be more efficient, and so forth. So, we are in the process now of building the framework for a go forward in the new normal.
Mm. So I've seen other organizations re-examining their structures and having more integration going on, whether it's meetings and events and expenses and payments. And I think your team has always been integrated with expenses as well, hasn't it? So this is nothing new for you.
We have, I feel very fortunate at Pfizer where we have a lot of collaboration between the business and our key stakeholders. So digital supports the expense side of the house. And we work very closely with that team to ensure, that the right triggers are happening, the right levers are happening, the right prompts and so forth are happening.
We're going to come back to that because I think that's really the key. Now, Alicia, your experience is quite different than other companies who've seen travel sort of shut down. So maybe you can tell us about what the year has been like for you.
Oh gosh, I have probably a lot to say on the subject, but I think really the pace of change and the unknown really put our team in daily and weekly calls with our stakeholders, so that we could outline the challenges that we were faced with and the complexities. We found ourselves organizing charters because commercial flights were not available, which required a lot of financial analysis. We worked with humanitarian flights. We worked with room blocks and even catering when our travelers needed food and meals in some of their locations. I really think the alignment for us was with our stakeholders and the focus on operational reliability, performance, and cost containment.
Would you also say that risk is probably as great as importance as far as stakeholders as it's ever been? Their awareness.
Absolutely. Our essential travelers needed to get to their destination. So we worked day and night putting together processes with our TMC, our suppliers, to make sure that our travelers were not stranded, denied boarding, some of the restrictions that were put in transiting airports with, minimum connecting times that were outside of the legal connecting times. So we had to negotiate airside rooms, had to negotiate with the airlines to allow our travelers to transit when they were over those maximum connecting times. We were successful in getting our airlines to change flight times, change day of the week. Some with one airline actually changed the airport they were flying to. So a lot of stakeholder engagement to understand the needs to get our critical staff to our projects.
So you really didn't have a respite because other companies who kind of shut down, the teams have had some time to re-examine what routes are available. Maybe there are no more direct flights, and so how do we go hub and spoke? All these sort of logistics you can work out, but you had to just jump in there and fix the problems because your guys were still traveling.
That's right. Yeah, we never stopped traveling.
So focus on risk a little bit. So my feeling is that the pandemic, when it first when there was sort of this lockdown, some in the C-suite, maybe for the first time, kind of said, "Oh, where are my people? Are they safe?" So in some ways, I think it's different for you guys because you've had this engagement with your stakeholders. But question is, how do you now you've shaken hands virtually, basically, with now the C-suite saying, "Okay, all this risk you're afraid of, we manage it, and here's how we manage it." So it's really, the question is how do you maintain that dialogue and engagement and influence, and use it to sort of reinvent what travel looks like. And Tina, I know that you've been doing that exercise in terms of what travel means for Pfizer, how to make it safer and better, et cetera. Can you maybe touch on that for us?
Sure. So we are in the process of kind of redefining, going into the third and the fourth quarter of this year and emerging into 2022. So we're really building some of the framework around what is purposeful travel and giving colleagues the tools to help them define what is the reason for their travel and what is the ROI on the trip. Certainly, budget allocations will be, I think, a little bit more sensitive going forward. We're, as close to zero budget in most companies that we've ever been. Doesn't mean there's not expenses, but certainly a lot less than what there was pre the pandemic. So we are in conversations right now to build the framework, giving colleagues the tools to empower them at the time of booking. So first, initial tools to why are you traveling? What's the purpose of your trip? How do you make sure that your manager is aligned for the purpose of that trip? And then empowering them at the time that they're booking to have the right decision-making tools. So, whether it's risk and safety considerations, carbon footprint considerations, those will all be presented before they book and throughout the booking path. And then keeping the communication tools open as they're on their journey, and then making sure that they have the right information when they return. So what's reimbursable, what's not reimbursable, those kinds of things. And then I think, keeping very engaged with our stakeholders on what in the business has changed since the pandemic. How are their business needs different, and what do we need to give them and provide them for the colleagues to ensure that they travel safely and are doing the right things for Pfizer. So that constant engagement and trusting what's emerging from the data, because what we did early on was we really looked at what did we do and what were our behaviors, what were the purpose of our trips pre the pandemic. And now how do we want to redefine that going forward? Starting from the place of what will you accomplish by meeting in person or traveling that you can't accomplish virtually? So, that definitely is a shift for us. So we're in the process of building all that framework out now.
And I think this dialogue is happening with quite a wide range of stakeholders, isn't it? There's buy-in from stakeholders at Pfizer that this discussion is important to reset.
Absolutely. It's a very critical dialogue, and it's a very active dialogue right now. We have a formal process that we follow. We have a global task force. We have sub-teams within the global task force. There's certain presentations throughout the process that are endorsed and then, modified some before that final decision, and then ultimately the communication that happens, throughout the organization. So it's been much different than other, types of, reactions to events or safety and security events in the past, where it's an ongoing, and I think most importantly, it's not static, and you have to continue to evolve with it. Really listen and understand how the business has changed and how maybe the traveler needs have changed. Maybe travelers that were, very much road warriors, they may have a level of fear that they didn't have before, those kinds of things. So just really listening and trusting, what emerges from the dialogue and what emerges from the data as you progress down that path.
And like you said, I think to me, it's before you have that seat at the table, and you need that if you're to engage and influence and help to drive the program, because you're the expert. And a lot of stakeholders, actually, everybody thinks they know travel just because they've traveled it, don't they? So, but you need to let them know that this is really a science and there's a structure behind it. So Alicia, I would call you an internal consultant, really, at Chevron as much as anything. So that's a role that many travel managers are seeking is that being able to consult and advise. And maybe you could talk some about the forecasting work that you do on behalf of your business heads.
Sure, thank you. I want to say I agree with Tina too. Our engagement might have been more quarterly in the past, and it definitely is. We're having engagements weekly, monthly, and quarterly. We are utilizing an infographic tool that we send out to probably 50 stakeholders. And our stakeholders for those business units could consist of a vice president, supply chain, procurement, an executive assistant, finance manager. And we send out this infographic on a monthly basis, and it breaks down the total travel spend categories, right? And is the spend, is it up, is it down? Are we utilizing our online booking tool? Are we compliant to our preferred suppliers and our lower cost strategies? Are we utilizing our preferred hotels? Are we still booking in advance? Are we taking advantage of lower cost airlines, et cetera, et cetera? And we have this all on, a one-page document that gives them the view of what is happening with the travel spend on a month-to-month basis, year-to-date, and then also outlines areas of opportunity in buying behaviors to reduce costs. And it's been a great tool to send out on a monthly basis. We do a kind of a customized narrative on what we're seeing. And we're also asking them questions on their travel needs, their travel budget. Has it changed? Is there any impacts that global travel can assist them with? And we also outline the initiatives that we're working on, whether that's a hotel RFP, air RFP, ground transportation RFP, and any other maybe technology initiatives that we're looking at. So we've had great feedback from utilizing this tool to engage with our travelers or with our stakeholders. So
that's fantastic. So you're talking about having your engagement backed up with evidence and data, which gives you that credibility and depth, which is fantastic. And I think the importance of data analytics probably has never been more important. So how do you think that's going to, so it sounds like you want to have more and more adoption of that sort of technologies at Chevron. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. The data consolidation and data available at our fingertips was so critical over the pandemic, and is still critical today.
Well, probably get even more and more important. And your stakeholders will start asking different questions and wanting different analysis. So how about you, Tina, in terms of use of data, use of analytics to help you make better decisions and communicate that with your stakeholders?
So we're doing some of the same things that Alicia just mentioned. We're using a similar infographic. We're using some, traditional PowerPoints. We're using some of the storyboards that are in the PredictX tool as well. And we're trying to really kind of tell a story to the stakeholders, and we're trying to customize it to not only the senior leadership, but also the various BUs, or to the finance or compliance groups, or to the occupational health and wellness groups, because each one of those may be asking a different question. And, I think one of the things with the business units going forward is really having that dialogue around what's going to be important, because some of the things that we maybe previously measured in the new environment going forward may not be as important. I think it's going to be really, really important to, there's the old saying, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. But I think going forward, it's more, if you can measure it, does it matter? Does it really matter? Does the things like 14-day advance purchase and things that are more traditional will they continue to be as important, or there'll be more different measurements going forward? And I think it needs to resonate with the different groups that you're talking with. You know, what resonates to my chief procurement officer is much different than what resonates with our key business units or to the traveler themselves. So I think it's just really trying to understand those needs and adjusting as you need to as we start to, you know, travel again and emerge out of the pandemic.
Yeah, so both of you mentioned flexibility in the changing landscape, and I'm just mindful that you know, Darwinian natural selection is exactly this. You have to have some sort of pressure to the ecosystem that incentivizes or rewards adaptation and change, and all of us in the sector have to adapt and change, including the suppliers and you know, including the RFP process, right? How long have we been talking about the fact that it's so antiquated and outdated and needed a better system? All of that needs to rethinking, I think. So we're getting down to the key question everybody in the audience wants to hear about, which is, how would you advise our audience in going about getting that budget, asking for, and successfully? Maybe start with you, Alicia.
I would say, you know, I believe we've got a strong engagement with our stakeholders, and again, and diverse stakeholders for each business unit. And so we utilize that tool to ask that question. You know, what's changing? What are the needs? How will that affect travel? So we're asking those questions. We don't ask those questions every month. So we know when our business planning stage starts to happen, we will, you know, put a timing in our Outlook calendar that we need to ask these questions, right? So we're preparing for budgets, we're preparing for value creation, et cetera. If it's a new stakeholder and we don't have a relationship with them, and it could be a new organization through, you know, an acquired company, is we reach out and we share with them the things that we're doing for other business units and other stakeholders. And we get that engagement by sharing what we're doing and ask them how we can support their travel budget moving forward and their initiatives in travel.
Yeah, that's great. Tina, if you can give your pearls of wisdom as well.
Sure. So we do a lot of the same things. And I think, you know, the key advice is, I think, going to them and providing what you are providing, what you do provide the other business units. What are some of the questions that you can answer? And then asking the question, what else can we do to help you? Because, and really listening. So much like, you know, when the suppliers come to call on us as buyers, you know, really understanding our business and what we need. And the same internally needs to happen. What each business, you know, our research and development team may need a completely different support system than our logistics and supply team. So really understanding what they need, what that traveler base may need. You know, our research and development people are very different than the supply chain people, are very different than enabling functions. So really understanding the differences between the business units and how to support them is key. And listening, you know, really listening. Here's what we can provide. What else, you know, can we provide you? And, you know, kind of have that brainstorming and that collaboration together.
Yeah. And also, I think not being afraid to be the expert, because you are the expert and they're looking at you for advice. Don't be shy about it.
Yeah, be a little bit bold. But I think it's balancing being bold and being the expert with listening and being humble and understanding that they may have something to offer you back.
Yeah.
And really, really listening, because sometimes as travel managers, you know, we get our ideas. Well, you know, you got to book 14 days in advance, or you have to, you know, do this or do that. And perhaps that you don't, you know, and certainly what happens in certain areas of the world or a certain country may be different. And so I think that's also the other thing that's super important is not to be country centric. You know, if you're based in the US, don't just be about the US. Really try to understand the different needs and the different expectations of the cultures, even within the business. What the business needs in an emerging market may be very different than what they need in a developing market. So really trying to understand that is key.
You know, that's fantastic. Thanks, Tina. Alicia, you mentioned two words so fascinating: value creation, and I want to come back to that. So I have this sort of framework that I think of, sort of how, I call it the success pyramid. So I might have mentioned it to you. So number one is engagement. You need to figure out a forum for engaging. But number two, below that, is risk. So if you think of the C-suite, what do they lose sleep over is the risk part. So if we say, I want to discuss risk, you have their attention. But you want to say, this is the issue, here's the exposure, and here's how I've covered it. It's fantastic. Below that is performance management, and which I'm going to come back to. And sort of the thing that a lot of travel managers, certainly before the pandemic, spent most of their time on was the operations, the sourcing, et cetera. And from a C-suite perspective, that's the least interesting. They kind of think that you have that under control. What I'm worried about is risk. I'm not worried about operations. But in terms of performance management, tell us about value creation and what does that mean, and how do you think that helps you with engagement?
Well, for Keesup, for me, when we sit down with our stakeholders and are doing a deeper dive of the travel spend and the key performance indicators and supply, we're also sharing with them the value that our suppliers are bringing. And it isn't just the hard dollars or the soft dollars any longer. It's also the service reliability, right? So, you know, we've used the opportunity to outline how our suppliers have brought value to us, ensuring that our travelers could get their checked luggage, for example, through to the final destination. How they allowed us to exceed, I hope none of them get mad at me right now, exceed maybe a 24-hour transit timeline, helping us engage with airside hotels so that our travelers with these really long layovers due to reduced schedules had a place to stay and relax. I mean, a lot of the airports had no services. So that kind of value, but every year we have to forecast and outline the value that our global travel team is going to bring. And historically, it's been most on cost avoidance, first cost, and total cost of ownership. So, what we're trying to do now is bring value creation and the service the suppliers bring us, and also the wellness and reliability of getting our staff to their projects around the world.
I mean, I think implicit in that is a way to have that dialogue. And when your suppliers are delivering value, implicitly, you're managing that delivery of value, which cements the value you guys are creating. Isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah.
So I think that's a fantastic tactic, because sometimes some travel managers are probably a little bit opaque. C-suite don't really see what they do. And by having a formal way of presenting value, and I think you do this on a pretty regular basis, that strikes me as a fantastic tool to increasing that engagement. So great. Any final thoughts? We have another 2 minutes left, so go to you, Tina.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what I said earlier, I think now is the time to, to stand up and be seen and put what value, demonstrate your value creation, report on it, be aware of the different personas and the different stakeholders that you're addressing, and think about what resonates with them, but just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Fantastic. Final words of wisdom, Alicia?
I agree with Tina. Be bold and be visible and be proactive.
Fantastic. So I want to thank both of you. I'm sure we all want to thank both of you. Go Suns, Alicia, tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you, Tina. And I bet you'll get a lot of people following up to ask you questions. Okay, I think we're done with this session, Natasha. If you want to take us out.
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry, thank you so much, Keesup, Alicia, and Tina. This has been an amazing session. I'd like for you to also know that we have another education topic coming up. So please make sure you visit the Event Hub. It's your handy place to navigate through the summit, and also for the supplier section as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of the day.
Great. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.